Hi, this is Ed in San Diego, and we have a very special guest coming on in just a couple of minutes, Kerwin Guillermo, and I'm in San Diego, and he's in Singapore. So it's just coming up to 6 a.m. here in southernmost Southern California, and of course it's about 9 p.m. in Singapore, same day today. Kerwin is well known in the industry of talent mobility management. For many years, he's been with Hewlett Packard Enterprises, HPE, and he continues his journey in a brand new position as global head. I'm reading this global head of HR compliance enablement at Hewlett Packard Enterprises. But today we're going to focus in on global HR and global talent mobility and some work that he's been doing to help pave the way for the future. And obviously that future also involves now global HR compliance. So we're going to focus on mobility and changes in the industry. So stay tuned and thank you. I'm back, and you're on Global TV Talk Show. And today is 7/21, which in Las Vegas terms, it's a lucky day. And we're really lucky here to have Kerwin Guillermo from HPE, Hewlett Packard Enterprises, and he's in Singapore. I've never been in Singapore. I've been in Hong Kong, but I haven't made it over there yet. But everyone,
We'll have to do something about that soon.
everyone else seems to be migrating from Hong Kong. So from a business point of view, hopefully that doesn't backfire. Hopefully it all works right for the people and businesses in Hong Kong. Such a beautiful place. Many years ago, I just want to say, I was a print publisher, and our leader publication was called California Bound, which was a destination services magazine that I created of community and school information, commuting patterns, lifestyle, sports, entertainment, things, and all the companies used it in LA area. And it became the official newcomer guide of the LA Chamber of Commerce. The first edition was published in late 1980, just to give you an idea of how old I really am. So, but I had a very successful career with that, and California has obviously mushroomed into what it is. I'm saying that because I was involved in the LA Chamber, and they became my biggest customer, meaning a distribution vehicle to the corporate community in Southern California, to the tune of more than 100,000 copies purchased. At the Chamber, I was active, and I was introduced to a gentleman from Seoul, Korea, and he was living in LA part-time and goes back and forth. He's a business broker, and one of his clients is a printing company. And he saw the big, beautiful magazine, California Bound, glossy, printed in the US, and he says, I could save you 50 or 60% by printing over there. So I said, okay, tell me more. And so it turns out that they made a really good offer, and they began printing, and it went fabulously well. And this is like 1983, 84, 85, and through the 80s. Amazing, right? And we also printed in Hong Kong, actually in Shenzhen. And so I've been there. And he also flew me into Seoul and have a tour of the factory and all that. Put me up in the Hyatt, up on the hill there, and the first class all the way. So I'm somewhat familiar, but I'm not familiar. So let's talk about the change that's going on right now within the world of global talent mobility management, how it's viewed by companies, large companies like HPE and of course others, but also smaller companies. But it's the large companies that are driving everything because of the money and because of the capability to take care of people if they want to. I want to bring in to this conversation just for a second here, and then we'll move on to the technical aspects of change within the global mobility. I read this morning in some research prior to this that compliance, global HR compliance, is a big deal. But before I knew about your new title and your new position, I didn't know anything about all that. But having read all that stuff in the last hour, again, over the first cup of coffee, it sunk in that you're in a straight line of growth and development, and you're going to be leading the industry because there's so much issues about every country has their own employment laws and, of course, tax laws. And compliance has become a big deal in the US with relocations and treating people fairly or not messing up their lives, assignees' lives, because of an assignment issue or whatever, how to take care of people and putting the customer, i.e. the employee and family, the assignee, at the center of everything, not an afterthought. I'm not being negative. I'm just describing what has happened, and then all the issues and the exceptions within the mobility policy administration that drives up the costs and drives people a little nutty. And so, and then you lose that talent if you don't take care of that talent. And that's the driving force, isn't it?
Absolutely. So I'll touch a little bit on compliance, and then I'll go back to the first part of the
Thank you.
question. For me, this is an interesting world we live in. I look at it as the yin and the yang. The regulatory environment keep chasing after technology and innovation, and the way we innovate, whether it's generative AI or just AI in general, how it is applied, how does it introduce bias, lack of transparency, the data sets behind all of that. Or maybe in many other regulatory environment, it's all about data protection. Are we protecting data that we're collecting? Is there legal basis for collecting that data? How long do we retain that? And as data is transferred across borders, it has to comply with multiple regulations across the world. So again, the regulatory environment is changing. The field feels relatively new, definitely lacks a lot of maturity. GDPR was the start 5 years ago. There's several versions of that going on in the world. China is putting together their own legislation. They're not signing up for the ASEAN model, and then US and the EU put into an agreement effective July 11 to put in force an extension of the GDPR sort of in the US. So a lot of that is new. A lot of that is changing. And that's also why I think it is exciting, because if you come in at the end of the day when everything is settled, then it's not as fun. Compliance is not fun at that point. But when you're when you put yourself to be part of the conversation, to have a voice in all of these, advocacy with government, advocacy with your right local representation, then your voice matters a little bit more than just somebody who would interpret the regulation and figure out how to comply and how to enable business. So that's what I'm about to do, what I've been doing for the last 6, 7 weeks now, and it will continue to drive what I need to learn, what I need to scale up to, and what I need to be able to perform in advance, hopefully on behalf of not just HP, but broader HR practice, in the same way that how I've treated my years in mobility, wherein initially, of course, your loyalty has to be about your employer, the community, your constituency. But then at some point, you realize that if you stand alone, it becomes harder to reach government advocacy Congress, for example, in terms of our position on H-1B lottery? How can it be better to prevent fraudulent applications the way we've seen that in the past, in this current year, rather to be in front of other, again, government bodies in the UK. HPE was given the opportunity to be in front of the parliament. So it becomes harder when you're trying to do it on your own. But when you try to coalesce with a few other corporates, with trade associations, then it becomes more possible. So I'm trying to lean on some of those learnings to apply in my current, what were some of the wins from the past. So that's
But
the second part of your question. I'll pause before I go to the first part. Go ahead.
yeah, let me let me jump in and say that talking about talent mobility management and the role of the relocation process and the manager of the relocation within a corporate structure. And uh, it's so logical that the role of the mobility manager, of course, it depends on the individual relocation manager within a corporate structure, their personality, their executive presence, and their way of how they communicate with the C-suite and other top managers. They need to be at the table, not only at the table, but it just makes sense in the acquisition, talent acquisition. If it's not local, it's relocation. It's mobile, and it could be virtual, at least part of the time, but it's relocation of some kind. And then the management of it, as you've just explained, it goes really deep and complicated. So the from talent acquisition, from say anywhere, into right place, right time, right position, this is what it's all about. And then the retention of that talent. And the story that comes to my mind, drawing an example to understand the why of all this, is like in building a building. Okay, like here in San Diego, they're building a new airport on top of the old, right down less than a mile from where I sit right here. And it's part of the infrastructure bill in the US, spending all this money. And I mean, they're doing a fabulous job though. And so they have an architect and a steel company supplying the steel, and then they have uh, a construction management company. And so the architect, you think of an architect, why is an architect so important? Well, because it's where things are going to go and how it's going to look and the interaction and the flow of people within the terminal and blah, blah, blah. And so it's the same. I got this idea. The relocation manager and the mobility team leader within a corporate structure has to be able to fit in with the other main players and as an equal, not just somebody who's going to handle the paperwork and the administration of the move, because it's that piece of talent that's hugely expensive for the company. Not only the day they're assigned and put on the plane, but cultivated, managed, coached along the way, say on a 90-day basis or something, to make sure that they're learning something, and then they're transmitting that new knowledge back to the team, and that becomes ROI measurement, not at the end of the assignment. And then that person becomes more valuable along the way, not only to themselves, but to the company. And that's what's being talked about now.
Correct. And again, I'd like to think that the conversation's been ongoing for years and years. If I continue to use that analogy, then again, as a culture, again, being fortunate enough to play the talent acquisition, I was leading talent acquisition before I got into Mobility Global. Having put on those different hats, what I've learned is, again, the customer is at the center of everything we do. I share custody of the same customer with other parts of HR, with finance, everybody else. So in that conversation, it has to be above and beyond the logistics and the planning for people that were moving domestic or international to be able to support construction in San Diego. It has to be around, what's the contract that we won in San Diego to build that airport? What's the team that you need? When do you need those? The real milestones. And then for me as TA, I have to be telling them, here's talent pipeline we can source locally, so you don't have to bring them in. But oops, again, you only need them for a short amount of time. Then maybe we outsource that instead of hire, because it becomes harder to hire and fire, for 3, 6 months, 9 months type project, depending on their role in that particular milestone segment of the construction. Oops, by the way, you need an architect, you need some other engineering guys. Do you need them to be local? There's an architect out of Thailand who has done another airport in another part of the world. If you're using that as part of your design bid, then should we be using that, or do you need to hire local? Do you need to have one remote and then a more local regional team? Are we in the business of supporting airport bids, not just in San Diego, but we can bid on other local airport, because now we know that there's country budget to build all of these as part of the Build Back Better program, maybe. Then we could be figuring out how to facilitate all of that, knowing that it's a series of different bids that we have to win. And oops, by the way, I have to include corporate tax, because even if the architect has done his design, his blueprint from Thailand, and then implemented that in San Diego, will Thailand authorities tax that because that was work done out of
Oof.
Thailand but built out of San Diego? Then that's how I see all of us around that table who share custody of the same customer have to behave. And then when we get to the point where TA tells me, okay, I don't have available local resources, it will be more expensive because we know San Diego rates are expensive, then we need to start looking for where do we bring in resources. If the TN visa is available, then maybe Mexico over to San Diego could be appealing. Maybe someplace else over to San Diego. Maybe there's a lot of construction that was paused in the Las Vegas, Nevada area that we could pull from. Maybe that's an appealing proposition. Let me look at that. So for me, those are how the different players should interact. And for me, again, our interest is not just about the speed to onboard and cost to onboard, which is very traditional, what everybody expects of mobility. At some point, we need to be knowledgeable and familiar with, if we're making these multiple bids and then we're bidding on arenas, we're bidding on airports, we're bidding on road infrastructure, then maybe we should be thinking about what's the labor pyramid we need, level of seniority, what's the footprint we need to have. So while timing and planning, workforce plan, etc., are in place, we could be moving people around instead of hiring by project. So for me, that's what I've learned over the years, doing a little bit of talent acquisition and a little bit of mobility. And then prior to that, I've built up some shared services along the way that allowed me perspective through the different lens of HR.
Now, your work, that's well, everything's going to be full circled and tied together. But on the show with Ben, I learned that you were very active in Dallas at the university. So is this a university project of looking at what's going on with global talent in a corporate structure?
Well, I'd like to think they have been ongoing for years and years. And I was invited back in 2020 to be part of the board, and I'm leading the talent mobility work stream now as part of the board of advisor for. And part of that, I have to bring in the aspirations to bring in more industry and academe collaboration, partnership, knowledge sharing. So we've done a lot of that for the last 6 semester. Every semester, twice a year, we would have a series of lecture, webinars, content stuff, and then every semester as well for 1 week content, and then we do competition. where we do pitch session, case study, and each group would be mentored by a friend of mine from across the industry, supplier, or corporate. And then for right now, summer ongoing, we have an intra-university competition going on between UTD and Monash University out of Australia. And then we plan to do something bigger in the months to come. We plan to do a government advocacy series for the fall, and then we'll do that for about 3 semesters leading to the US election. So we'll try to invite people from government, talk about immigration platform, immigration advocacy, the tax reform bill that was signed in 2016 is supposed to expire, I think, 2023 or 24. So we're trying to bring in some voices there and start to introduce that with the students along with the industry. I don't think we do conferences based on a lot of these government advocacy stuff. We'll try to invite people from government, and then we'll try to start introducing flavor from the UK as well.
Fascinating stuff. And how much of that will be virtual?
It For this fall semester, because the intent is not to limit it to the students, it will be all virtual. So the competition will be face-to-face local, but everything else we will open it up for free, no sponsorship, no anything for any corporate to listen in and participate in the conversation with government offices.
And then you have the recording for replay. Yeah.
Absolutely. All of
Yeah.
those are posted in our, when I say our, this is the UTT YouTube channel for the Global Mobility Club that we've put up since 2021, I think.
Well, I applaud that. So my live conference business, which by the way started in 1984 at the LA Chamber of Commerce, the chamber was my largest customer. They bought a lot of copies, as I said, but and all the big companies in Southern California used it as a result of the chamber's endorsement. They said, okay, Ed, we've helped you, bring us more members. So I says, okay, how about a luncheon in your lunch room downstairs, looked like a cafeteria, the old style cafeteria. And, with wrought iron tables and, white lights above, it was a cafeteria. And they said, okay, we'll host it. You bring in the people. And so I didn't know really what I was doing, but I knew how to sell ads and I knew how to bring people together. So I got Bank of America and Ernst & Young and Northrop Grumman and Boeing and space companies and defense companies, TRW, as well as Paramount Pictures and some others, hospitals. The HR people, the recruiters, and if they had a relo manager at that time, they all came because the speakers were Dave from Chevron and Kathy from Apple and some guy from Paramount Pictures, and the keynoter was the head of the LA Economic Development Corporation.
It helps when you have a purpose that is relatable for many others to be able to bring in enough support. In the same way that, again, for all of our again 6 semesters now, we've been able to pull in. I'd like to thank again the biggest logos of integrity. I try to really screen and filter every invite to people I admire, leaders I admire, voices I admire, thought leaders, practice leaders, to be in front of the students to inspire our next generation of mobility professionals. And it's been really a fulfilling journey. We've started doing career stuff as well. For the last 2 semesters, I've invited headhunter friends of mine from my other world to be able to teach students how to present themselves, how to prepare for interviews, to inspire them by bringing in prior, again, mobility leaders that I've seen who've done the rotation across HR, talk about their career, hopefully inspire others that way. It's been really good.
It's really
it's one of
good.
the more fulfilling stuff I've done in my career.
Yeah, and give the students a perspective, and it becomes a resource for the community beyond the students and the chairs there. And what I've learned since then, particularly since the pandemic stopped my live conference business on or about March 1 of 2020, I had to learn how to be a happy TV talk show host using Zoom. And so we've done over 600 broadcasts since then, but bringing people together in what I call this global meeting room, and then recording everything, and it's all on my YouTube channel. And I would suspect that that's what you're going to be doing also. It becomes a resource, open source.
what uh what we're preparing for, again, we have a lot of content, a lot of voice that are valued in our community. The intent is, in the foreseeable future, we will be putting up, we'll be partnering with a few organizations to put up UTD GME, UTD FEM certificates. Out, if things fall into place, we should have that by first quarter of 24. So
Great.
coming from the university certification program, that helps with the continuing education. It's a little bit business, but unlike the subscription type certification program that exists in our industry right now, you don't need to keep paying us because you earned it one time. You can keep using that, and hopefully employers and hiring managers value something that originates from, again, institution of learning versus the trade association at some point, or a combination of both. Then it becomes more meaningful. Again, coming from ITA background, that's what I look for.
And the feeling that you have is driving. I mean, the good feeling of giving back and establishing something for a broader use and a new generation.
It's again, mobility has been very, very good for me in my life, in my career. I feel like my life has been entwined with mobility for a few generations. My grandparents escaped China, during the difficult years, and moved to Manila in search for better life, and that better life was selling eggs. And then my grandfather passed away when my dad was not even high school, so he didn't finish, and he had to be one of those early business travelers by delivering eggs to the province via public bus. So, and then again, years after, immigration made a difference in my life. That's why my name doesn't match my face. That's how I got my naturalization in the Philippines. And then again, fast forward to about 12 years ago, HP got me to move from Manila to Singapore, and I have a daughter who's about to come home, and she's just finished her first day of orientation in university right now. Access to better education, hopefully a better life, and for me, that's how I look at mobility. It's definitely above and beyond moving people from A to B. It's moving them closer to their dreams, to what's possible, to breaking those glass ceilings, because
And
mobility has the power to change the trajectory of your career and change your life for the better.
and that is the wonderful aspect of the industry. I was introduced to ERC in 1979. All right, and that was the first one that I attended to, and it changed my life, and it gave me direction and a track to run on, and learning. And so, boy, it wasn't work; it was fun.
ERC was a lot of inspiration for me when I started as well. Again, ERC then is different from ERC now. I
Right.
just need to draw that line. I got in during the time of Peggy, when ERC was huge. It's a pilgrimage that you look forward to, that you make every year, going to wherever ERC is going. When they're in Asia, I'd be in Hong Kong and wherever ERC is. I'll try to be there, because it's, again, you walk away like going to a retreat. You walk away inspired, and you know what you want to do, a fresh set of ideas. So ERC made the difference in my life that way, in my career. And then it made another difference in 2020, when, after Peggy left, ERC became very different culture wise. And when I decided, I was elected chair, I was chair elect in 2020. And I decided, again, hopefully you tell me the truth, if this has never happened, a chair elect uh, giving up that position I'm 2 months away from being chair. I gave up that position because I couldn't stay anymore with an org where our values and level of integrity is just different. But that made a profound difference in my career afterwards, 2020 to right now. I made a stronger effort to contrast what I do versus what I didn't like. I had a better vision, clarity. I saw this speech from Conan O'Brien at Dartmouth University commencement address, and he spoke about how the measure of success for people in his profession was to host the late night show. And it happened, but didn't happen. But in the key message was with that much disappointment that he went through, disappointment came with clarity and conviction. And I think a lot of that was relatable because all my career, I wanted to be in that seat, in that role. I worked hard to be able to get there and I got it. But was disappointed. It became very different than what I envisioned it to be. So when I exited ERC, that's when I started challenging myself. What else can I be doing? Supporting grassroots organization, just events, MIA, do a session in Prague. Nobody goes there. Do something else with the university. Never been done. They wouldn't get attention because they don't generate revenue for a not-for-profit organization. That wouldn't be interesting. So I kept challenging myself and challenging the friends that are around me in our community to keep doing all of these. And fast forward 3 years after, I feel like there's a lot more attention. A lot more of these grassroots organizations are taking a lot of the spotlight and feels really good. I feel good exiting the industry right now, the community right now, because I know we have a batch of mobility leaders that have integrity and values that I know I could be comfortable seeing them lead all of these and as I exit.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Okay, so let's talk about taking care of the assignees. All right, and coaching them to upskill and reskill, record their knowledge, and then apply it to the next person following them on that trail, and then using those skills, of course, for another position within the same organization. I would think that is job number one for the company. There's so much money being spent.
It depends on the why of the mobility. That's certainly one of the whys of mobility. That's knowledge transfer. But again, there's other why of mobility for us. So in relation to that, a few things that we've done: take care of the assignment, take care of the investment. You mentioned ROI earlier. When I started this, I didn't want to spend a lot of time measuring ROI. I want to be influencing ROI rather than be a spectator and measure that. So what we've done is, again, working with since of my past as PA, poaching talent from competitors, and I would poach talent who just came back from assignment because they're valuable, who just transferred because they're vulnerable, right? People who just returned are most vulnerable.
Right.
So I would recruit them and poach them, and we'd be successful. So what I've done to protect our own talent, pay for my sins, was we started doing this mobility performance award, put in incentives that would retain employees post the transfer.
I love
So
that. That's a great
put,
idea.
we'll put in a bucket of money, tie that to goals. You cannot prorate this. If you're still an active employee 12 months from today, hit your targets, you get paid more money. More money for a one-way transfer is between 3 to 4 months of salary. So knowing market trends, knowing HR benchmarks, it's hard to negotiate for a 3 to 4 month sign-on bonus. So it becomes an effective deterrent for retention post transfer. We've done the same for people on assignment. If we send people over to San Diego for that airport construction, we would tell them again, this project's good for 6 months. That's your goal. If you finish that goal, if you're successful in 4 months, we'll pay you more money. If you're successful after 6 months, we'll pay you more money. But if you need 8 months to complete a 6 months goal, we'll probably not pay you more money. So it becomes an incentive now for productivity. So for me, in a world where I can spend all my time to measure ROI or influence ROI, we put our investment in redesign of the program. So we stole some of the ideas from Comp and Ben, how you do deferred compensation, how you do equity targets, and how you do all of these stuff. And we applied it in mobility.
And you measure it.
Oh, yes, yes.
Yeah. And it becomes what, a case study?
Well, for every company and us traditionally, you have your cost projection. People focus on cost. We ask the manager to also put up what's the goal, and then we go back at the end of the assignment. You're asking for an extension because they hit the goal and there's more, or there's something that changed, or they're coming home earlier because they failed, or they hit the targets faster. So we learn more, we gain more insight, but along with the insight, we're giving incentives as well.
Yeah, it's interesting. Let's talk about in mobility management today and maybe tomorrow. This family, the spouse, and it's an old story.
Absolutely. So we've started to focus on engagement. I'd like to think when I started, people were still doing satisfaction, and then there's many years people focus on experience. But I think the war for talent will be one based on engagement. How connected I am with something bigger than moving from A to B. So we do that from the very beginning when we're trying to recruit you, where we're trying to make you aspire to raise your hand. I want to go to for that move because I know it's bigger, and it's not about the richness of the
and it, and
compensation. It
it's a
becomes
track to
bigger.
run on for a better life, as you've talked about the role. If
Career, life.
you build your life because you're in a new area.
So we start campaign based on that. And what that means is when we're recruiting somebody from our competitors, I will give them time with our immigration counsel to be able to reassure them, yeah, when you transfer, it's fine. It will not change. It will not delay your time, or not all sponsors are created equal. Here's HPE, RFE rates, success rates, etc., etc. And oops, by the way, we can give work authorization to your spouse. We can, give you commitment like a sign-on bonus, but not sign-on bonus, that we will start your perm residency process application within the first year. So hopefully in a location like Texas, if we're hiring from our competitors locally based on benchmark that we've learned, that it becomes a differentiator. It's not as much a differentiator in the Bay Area, but in Houston, where HQ is for us, it's a differentiator. Then we're starting to do that now across EMEA, across other locations, operate, the intent to do perm. Again, at a time when layoffs are happening, companies don't invest as much in immigration. We're trying to do that, and in countries where it's allowed, offer work authorization for the spouse. Will that make our offer more valuable than compensation, job offer in itself? Wherever we're short there, definitely the promise of a better life, the promise for stability because of the engagement, what's meaningful, relevant for you and your spouse, you'll get that.
What about a tie? And this is just off the wall here, but you're inspiring me to think openly. So thank you. Working with the local, let's say the American Chamber of Commerce in Switzerland or in Singapore, these are valuable resources of connections. So my point is, like managing relocation from 3.0, not 2.0, is from the get-go connecting with somebody who's already been relocated to that place, who's like the spouse or an executive who's a member of that local American Chamber of Commerce in Oshkosh, and getting them in touch with the transferee coming in, and to have a welcome and make a connection with a firm appointment to visit and have a coffee and make a connection, so that the transferee spouse or partner has a connection of their own.
Definitely, there's power with community. One of my earliest, because again, I didn't grow up in mobility. One of my earliest things that I've done when I took the HP Asia mobility role was to do community stuff. At the time, we had maybe 60 plus expats in Singapore. I'd host things like uh, there's no snow, but there's a place that does snow stuff for children. So we do that and give them hot chocolate. It was successful. We started doing culture stuff, celebrating Chinese New Year with some lion dance and palm reading. So bringing people together, it helps, each other become support system of each other. Again, that's for family and all. But I've also done experiments on, again, looking at the putting the customer at the center, particularly for the most senior level, like your example. So in the past and still is right now, you see mobility being used as like a rite of passage for you to be a global leader. Do your tour of duty in the different regions. So I've noticed some of that, and I've enlisted the support of a few partners and told them again, without mobility for big four or other consulting companies, you would be dying. You would probably pay to have access to people that I'm landing in Singapore. You'd probably do that and you'd probably not be successful. So what I can do with you is I have captive audience because I know who's coming, I know when they're coming, I know their profile, I know their job, I know it's rite of passage, tour of duty. If I bring them in, can you offer your services to consult with them, to give them the lay of the land? Here's your
Right.
competitors in the market, here's etc. Can I help plan your next 100 days for you and bring your whole team together? For them, it's a sales and marketing pitch, it's business development. But for me, it's about integration and helping all of these. So we started offering that to a few execs that are coming in, and people value that. I
Yeah, it
remember
reduces the risk of failure.
in China, when we built a factory, when I was with Intel at Dalian, it's a tier three city, it's the first fab, and we had to prepare Dalian. Again, China one child policy at that time, tier three city. They weren't prepared for 300 expat families from Arizona, New Mexico, Intel factories, people, engineers going there. So we started, to your point, working with local governments, NGO. They didn't have housing. Again, people were very much willing to break down walls, etc., connect houses. But eventually, we had to use blueprints from homes in Chandler, Arizona, and New Mexico. Give them to local developers, and they work with government. Work with government for us. In our backyard, they built homes that looks like Arizona, and they didn't even have American Curriculum International School. They only have uh, Canadian. So we had to work with local government, with NGOs as well. So donation here and there, the government gave the land, utilities, etc. So they built an American international school, and we got first dibs on enrollment when we started, and then gave the rest to the others. So there's power when you think bigger than, out of the box, but that's bigger than moving people from A to B, putting your customer at the center, and then figuring out all of these things, connecting with HR, connecting with other companies. There's real power for me. That was the most, one of the most fulfilling uh, experiences I had in mobility.
This is a great conversation. Thank you. Kerwin, please come back on Global TV Talk Show in 2 or 3 weeks. If that's good for you, we can find 30 minutes.
I'm approaching this one as my audition for my next. So thank you.
Well, you're in. You won. Thank you very much for your time. Have a good evening. This is Ed in San Diego, Kerwin in Singapore. This has been a terrific interview, conversation. As you could tell, audience, it's not scripted, and we tried to make it spontaneous and fun. Thank you, sir. Bye-bye.